Hello and welcome to UK Versus. Today we are talking mental load, and we are joined by UVS Hermit, the founder of the Hermit School, which breaks down all the abilities and aspects of the card game into easily to digest chunks for new players and existing players alike. So I thought that'd be a great opportunity to get you on to talk about mental load as well, because of the amount of abilities that are coming in. But let's start off with, as always, we're joined by Richard, who is not donning the Klingon attire for the first time in a while.
Yes, I'm glad to...
I do gotta say, I loved that. I thought that was perfect.
It's the first podcast in a bit, or content done in a bit, that I don't have to wash my head afterwards. Yeah, so I haven't really done much, I guess, in the UVS space. We had locals on Thursday, which was basically just me and Gary jamming a bunch of games, just trying out some decks. So not too much, but we're certainly we're starting to think about nationals. So one thing we did for the recent regionals, we had like a workshop session where we all gathered and sort of picked apart everyone's deck list and sort of went over it. So we're trying to plan one a bit earlier this time for nationals and sort of look at that and maybe get a bit more prepared.
How's Big Bert doing?
Big Bert?
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's really looked at him yet. In terms of Bert 2. I know obviously we had the recent webcam Let's Talk UVS tournament, and we had Bert 1 win, and I think Bert 2 came second, and I think there was another Bert in top 8 as well, I think. But yeah, we haven't really been looking at it too much. But yeah, we're just sort of trying to get a bit more of a head start, because I think last time we went through the sort of workshop process but didn't really have too much time afterwards to sort of play test the stuff. So yeah, try to get a bit of a head start.
I was going to bring this up a little bit later on, but first of all, I'll just quickly announce something then, given that you've just talked about local play and preparing for nationals. But first of all, let's check in with our guest. Cameron, how are you doing? And how have you been? How's your testing been going?
I've been doing good. My testing is a bit of a struggle. My locals have all been very busy, so I'm only getting 1, maybe 2 people a week over 2 different stores. And nobody likes the deck I'm trying to run for nationals. So it's getting to be one of those, well, if they have to play me, it's no one's having fun, and that makes it not so fun. So that's why I was always kind of, for lack of a better word, the hermit, doing my testing in private and then playing just fun stuff for locals. But I decided, well, I've got some more competitive locals. I should try to at least see if they're running some of the decks I know I need to worry about, see how that's going to go. But then the issue is once they figure out how to beat my deck, I can't win. So it's just one of those, all right, cool. We'll at least hope that I can catch everybody at US Nationals off guard. And my whole goal is just to get on stream and goof around, so...
Yeah, no, I mean, we've just uploaded round 2 of the EU Nationals, EU Regionals, where I got put on stream against the Irwin deck, which was a lot of fun. We even got both people in to talk about it. But that's one of the things. It's very hard as a content creator to manage the content and the practice. I know most of the time this year I've not been practicing for events until the week of the event. I know David's taking a step back from content creation because he wants to give nationals his all, and I know as we get closer, more and more people will do that.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense. I know that my only shot at getting to Worlds is top 8 at Nats, but even then I don't know if I can do the turnaround, especially asking time off of work to within 2 weeks to go to Florida. So I'm like, if I can just go meet some of the people I haven't seen in a while, have fun, maybe get on stream. I've only been on stream once in my life, and that was harrowing. You could just see me on stream having a heart attack as I'm just shuffling up with a champion level player, and totally made myself look like an ass.
I know that feeling, man. I know that feeling. I was in the game about 5 months. when I got put on stream playing Dabby in a webcam event. I was like, oh, cool! And I was up against.
This will be fine.
I was up against pre-errata Kirishima too. So yeah, but
See, what's hilarious is I was in a retro tournament.
ooh,
So I was playing with some of the old crazy stuff. And round 2, I get set next against Jacob Johnson,
yeah.
who's big name. And I've only played him one other time at another retro event, and I won because he was playing some goofy deck that just didn't work. So I was like, man, okay, I'll take my loss in round 2. That's fine. Well, they walked over and said, hey, we're putting you on stream. I said, don't put me on stream against Jacob Johnson. Put me against someone who's going to make me look good. And then I ended up winning 2-0, and it made me look like an ass. So
Are you playing in
just kinda felt
the
bad.
retro event next week? The TTS one with the weird ban list?
no, because I am terrible at TTS. I was going to do it until I found out it was a TTS, and I cannot work that to save my life. But
You've got a week to
they
practice.
did unban. They did unban a character that I had previously got banned. So I was excited about that again until I saw that it was on TTS. I was like, well, dreams dashed.
Mature's still banned, so
True, but the character that I had got banned was an old Red Horizon character, a promo character. And the whole thing was I was going to play a retro event in Omaha, but I wanted to make sure my deck actually worked the way I thought it did before traveling 7 hours, and turns out your deck doesn't work. So I asked the head judge, I was like, hey, does this character work the way like I think it does? He goes, that is absolutely hilarious. It does work. Next day she's on the ban list. That's a little rude.
I wonder why. But
Moral of the story, kids, ask for forgiveness rather than permission.
oh yeah, well I mean I've done it a couple of times with like Struggle with Studies and Blue Flame Torment. I had to fight UVS themselves to get them to actually say yes, you can make them. You force if they fail the check on their second attack, it still counts for Struggle with Studies. So when they play their second attack, it's actually the third attack. And it went like all the way up to the head judge at UVS. Like, no, that's exactly how it works. I had to fight so many people for that. But speaking of events, speaking of practicing for nationals, I've been working on something in the background with the Dobbers and Card Goblin. I've spoken to a few people, and at the same time as the Webcam World Championships that Tam and David are doing, not intentional, it's just the only day that works for everyone. We'll be running a Universe's charity webcam event. So while you're watching those guys play, you can jump in and play a standard event with ourselves and the Dobbers commentating. Card Goblin, ourselves and Dobbers have put in a lot of prizing, and all money goes to Food for All, an international charity that gets food to people that need it. And because it's that time of year where we're looking at the holidays, I thought that was an appropriate charity to give to. We'll be starting about 11 a.m. our time, which is, I know it sucks for you guys over in the US, but in the prizing, we're going to have regionals promos, we're going to have AOT Origins of Power Boosters, a Kurabara Chrome, a signed Vash by the voice actor Johnny Bosch, as well as any other prizing that we can get between now and then. This is just what we've got now. It'll be put into bundles to go to the top 4 players. It's live on UGN now. It's live on GoFundMe for the prizing, and all you have to do is donate a minimum of £10 to the GoFundMe, and then you can play the event. It's just a way that we can all kind of give back and do a little bit in there. And all the prizes are kind of coming from the Dobbers and ourselves' personal collections. We just wanted to have a nice little fun event before Nationals and give back to... Yeah, just give back.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
It'll be standard, so it'll be legal for... So I did try to get a fun format like challenge or something in there, but with Nationals coming up, I was convinced just to make it flat standard.
Yeah, I think
Makes sense.
I think standard is going to draw more people in than a weird format. Unless maybe you did.
Because then it also gives you Nats testing.
Yeah, exactly.
Gives that testing, give some people to do while they're watching the top 16 webcam players from the circuit play, and gives you a chance to walk away with a Chrome, a signed Vash card, which are quite hard to come by, as well as all the other prizes in there. And because we'll be streaming it, I'll try and do some giveaways throughout the stream. I have got Moopsy plushies coming, so I might chuck one of those on the prizing. because I got a discount if I ordered multiple, so I ordered 3, but I only really need 1. But let's get back.
Hey, saving money.
Yeah, I say basically I was basically buy 2 get 1 free, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to argue with more Moopsies. I can have a little Moopsie army. What is the plural of Moopsie? Is it Moopsies, Moopsai?
I don't watch this show. Maybe it's like Moose and it's just Moopsie.
It's kind of like a Pokemon. It only says its own name. So it's like we've only seen one of the shows so far. I haven't seen season 5 to see if they come back, but we've only seen one so far, and it's beautiful. But we're here to talk about mental load with the Hermit Master, and mental load is your basically how much you can understand about what's going on in the game state before you become overloaded. It's how much you're taking in and how much you're understanding. And we got an article just before AOT 1 basically saying that the company wanted to reduce mental load. So we were getting things like Blitz, which were going to be reducing the response windows and allowing attacks to basically do all their effects before the enhanced step. So you're just enhancing from your actions and foundations and assets. And then we also got a lot of new mechanics. And then we got to Dark Hero Arc, where we got Vestiges and things that interact with Vestiges. And then we got AOT 2, where we got even more mechanics with Outwit. And now we've just got Star Trek, where we've got Frenzy. Soul Leveling is bringing in a whole new card type in the skill tree and XP cards. And an article has just come out about Critical Role where it explicitly says it's going to have new mechanics. So the question I'm posing is, how many new mechanics can we get before the game itself starts exceeding players' mental loads?
Honestly, as someone who's played for a long time, obviously I have a little bit higher tolerance for mental load, but for newer players, it can be overwhelming. I've often said this like about games like Yu-Gi-Oh!, where I started learning when the game first came to America. If I had to learn that game from scratch now, game over, I couldn't. So you do have this issue with keeping it fresh and new for your more experienced players, how to increase the difficulty to keep them engaged, but not too high to where your newer players can't get in. And I think I said this to you, that I wouldn't be so upset about all these new mechanics if they hadn't already spent 2 months telling us they were going to try to simplify the game.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, simplify. That'll make the Hermit School a little bit easier. It's better onboarding for new players, which is why I created that playlist, just to make it as simple as possible for new players. If just to self-plug a little bit. Every video is like 5 minutes or less, and it dedicates 5 minutes to every little aspect that I could possibly think of in the game to try to explain everything. So you don't have to watch 1 hour-long video. You can watch in whatever chunks you need. But yeah, then Attack on Titan dropped, and I had to make 6 new videos within like a week. And then Attack on Titan 2 drops with Outwit being probably one of the more complicated abilities to worry about when it comes to mental load. Because if your rival builds something in face down, as opposed to flipping it, you don't know what that is.
Yeah.
So you've got to constantly think, okay, do they have a counter that I'm not thinking about? And that could increase mental load right there. Of course, if you're a player like, some of my locals, or a player like me, you could just say, screw it, and just unga bunga your way into whatever traps and hope that they can't overcome you. I've definitely had a couple of those, like, well, if you've got it, you've got it. That's kind of what you got to do sometimes. But, having to explain why assets aren't like foundations, and then why backups aren't like foundations, but they're also not assets, it can be a little taxing, especially when the new demo doesn't go over as much as you would think.
Yeah.
Like when I did demos, they'd be admittedly long, like 20, 30 minutes, but it slowly built up everything. Play everything without abilities, then let's try with abilities, let's go a little bit slower. Try to gauge the new player learning and what they were learning best ways. But with the scripted demo, as much as I enjoy having just a quick 10-minute demo, it doesn't prepare you as much as you would think a demo would. So
I think that's fine though.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
just on the demo, I think the demo and the script and the way it's done is pretty good in terms of just a quick hitter of here's like the very bog standard basics, just so you understand exactly sort of what the general flow of the game is like. And then we can
I will say that
later if you're, we can go into a full teach later, but I think as a demo, that's sort of, I think, what you should be aiming for. Like, I think everything else aside, I think the way that demo is set up is pretty good. Much better than, say, trying to teach with the Deku Bakugo ones. Like, I think the AOT one works much better. Like, I think that was...
Oh, yeah, and it's really good for learning the rhythm, like you were saying. I think it teaches the rhythm of the game, the back and forth, perfectly.
And I think that's the important
it feels
part
like it
get early.
Yeah, I think it's more designed for, like, bigger events, though, where you might have, like, a line of people waiting, and you can just get 10 minutes. Do you like it? Cool. Maybe move on to someone who could tell you more about the game. But as, like, the more intimate local, where maybe you don't have so many people... it does feel like it lacks a little bit, and then you're just sitting there explaining, okay, well, we didn't go over this card type, so it's a give and take, and I do appreciate that we do have a more standardized demo experience now, but when they keep just adding new after new after new, it does feel like, okay, some of the attacks are getting simpler, but the mechanics aren't getting simpler.
Yeah, to go back to your example of that Yu-Gi-Oh! Learning the game, whenever there was a new kind of archetype from what I remember when I played, when like the GX stuff rolled around and when the Synchro stuff rolled around, the starter decks were focused on this is the new mechanic coming into the game, and the entire deck was designed to teach you that mechanic and revolve around that mechanic. And what we're getting like with AOT is just... here's the cards, learn how to play. If we got new Clash decks that were just situated around Outwit, that'd be really cool. Because it allows people to go, okay, I can pick up these cards, I can get some Outwit cards, I can have a better understanding of how Outwit is going to impact the game. But then that's also creating more products when people are getting a bit of product fatigue at the minute.
True, but what it would also do is give you a printed booklet detailing exactly how that new mechanic works with like photo
assets.
What's the word? Assets, yeah, but the examples, that's the word I was looking for. So it would actually break it down, and I think that's one thing that we as a game struggle with. We don't have a rule book, and I think it's really hard to have one when you're also changing things, adding things every set or every other set, which is again why I have the playlist where I can just, Frenzy's a new thing I didn't see coming. Let me make a 3-minute Frenzy video, put that on, and add that to the list. But I do like how they are actually simplifying some older card abilities, like Echo. Way easier to understand than Multiple.
Yeah.
From the old retro days. I hated explaining how Multiple worked. As much as you enjoy Reversal, and I enjoy Reversal, there are certain characters that made explaining how a reversal works impossible.
I just love
because then you have to get into attack stacks and timing keywords and stuff like that, and it's just awful.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Speaking about rule changes and simplifications, as an old head, how do you feel about the fact you can no longer commit your character to pay a foundation cost?
All right, so I had mixed feelings on this one because I will admit it is an ability I've abused in the past. But it is one that I discovered when I was teaching myself how to play. We downloaded the legal rules, which were about that thick, and I read it 3 times. I felt like I was studying for the bar exam. But that's where I discovered that I could commit my character for a foundation cost, even though it's not a foundation. And it blew my local players' minds because they didn't know you could do that. I do agree that it's not intuitive. I agree you could tell people, but not having it simplifies the roles of your cards more to where it is a character, it is not a foundation. Sure, you can commit it to pass a check, but that is a special property of a character. if something says commit one foundation, you should only be able to commit foundations, unless something like Mimic or Hanji says you can commit this as if it were a foundation. I think it's just one of those, if you know, isn't really good for especially newer players, because when you find out, it's usually because someone did it to you, and that doesn't feel good to learn that kind of on the job learning. So honestly, I understand it, and it doesn't hurt my feelings any.
Yeah, I was talking with Mike Hardiman about it. There's his shout out. And I was basically saying it's a good thing because it's one less thing to teach new players. It's one less thing for new players to have to understand. And they don't get that kind of gotcha gameplay where you go, haha, you thought I was out of options, but I can commit my character. And Mike pointed out to me that he's played games at Nationals against people who have been playing the game a while who did not know you could do this because no one's going through the living rules document and going through it all. And it's not covered in demos. It's not one of those things. And the way you read cards, you would not think you could commit your character like Foundation. And it's kind of, like you're saying, it's more...
Which reminds me, I need to go through my character video and double check that I did say that so that I can now change it to where it doesn't. So I have to go change that.
Updated character hermit video coming soon.
Yeah, character 2.0. Now, I'll probably just refilm the whole... I'll probably watch it, figure out what I said, refilm the whole thing, and just re-upload it. I don't edit.
So let's talk about game state mental load and the fact that we're getting things like Frenzy and Outwit and all these other things like that, but we're also getting characters like Bertolt 2, which remove a lot of attacks. So if I've got a Frenzy card and I've been removing lots of attacks, and we don't have a sufficient judge program, honestly, to talk about what rules and what the game state infractions would be if neither player can remember how many attacks were blocked.
By the way, I'm just waiting for my window where I can go off.
Yeah,
so,
you can go off. If you want to go off first, Richard, you go off.
Just in general.
Richard, response window's open.
On that, on that first subject of mechanic bloat, so I think Blitz is probably something we should address as a separate thing, right? We can go off on whether I think Blitz is a good idea or not. But just in terms of mechanic bloat, obviously I'm not well versed in loads of card games. Like I refuse to ever learn or understand Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't really know Pokemon or any of the other games. Magic is a game I know, right? And generally speaking, if there's a new set, there is always a new mechanic in Magic. And obviously,
I'll be back in a second, guys. I'll let you pop off.
That's how sets almost sell, right? It's a selling point, i.e., it's got the new mechanic. But the thing with Magic is most mechanics are just a variant of kicker, right? With universities, obviously, historically, we just haven't done this, right? We've got 15, 20 years of sets, and certainly in old times, we only really had, outside of stuff, we had I guess Gauge was new that were added at some point. Multiple was probably added at some point, but it wasn't really we do a new mechanic every set.
Yeah.
So it sort of feels like we may be entering a world where we're trying to do that. I don't know how good an idea it is in terms of adding all of these things. I think they shouldn't be added for the sake of it, and sometimes it maybe feels like it sort of is. I think if they are mechanics, again, there's probably specific terminology which people people who are a little bit more sort of understanding game design know, like the evergreen and stuff like this. But if they're just sort of set specific, then they're okay, I think. But certainly when you start getting a newer player into the wider world of Standard, having to think about things like Frenzy and Outwit and all this stuff, I think it is becoming maybe a bit too much. It is a bit too bloated. Whereas, but the thing is, I look at a mechanic like Frenzy, I think that is a totally reasonable mechanic to bring in because it's really simple, right? You're not adding too much to the mental load, so to speak. It's a really easy one to understand. You just get some extra stats if you've blocked. or your opponent. Like I think like frenzy is fine. Like I think outwit is a nice idea, but I think there's too much hand wavy confusion as to how things exactly work, especially when you factor in things like sealing and flipping, unflipping, flipping, all this sort of stuff, like how it actually works. Like I don't think we should go down the path of a new mechanic per se. Like I think that is too much. I think adding new mechanics to the game is totally fine as long as there is value in doing so, right? Like I said, I think frenzy is totally fine. It feels a bit weird of a mechanic maybe to add with Star Trek in terms of thematic thing, but frenzy feels like a mechanic that could be an evergreen one, right? Totally reasonable. Like if you look at things like frenzy and outwit, they are generic enough keywords that you could have them everywhere. But I do think we probably do need to step back in terms of, not having one every set. And if we do, they have to be worthwhile. And maybe try and look at that kind of almost magic model of everything's like just a variation kicker. Because that's a way of adding these new mechanics without really adding too much to the overall tapestry of like the complexity of your mechanics. Like they're all basically doing the same thing, and they're very easy to, once you've got like the sort of muscle memory of understanding what kicker does in Magic, you can basically understand pretty much every mechanic in Magic. So there should be maybe a similar sort of approach here. So yeah, I mean that's sort of I think you can absolutely add new splashy mechanics in sets, and that's fine. Like I would fully expect there to be a splashy mechanic in Critical Role. I'd expect there to be one in Turtles. I think those are fine things to do as long as the mechanics make sense and they're not sort of too dumb like complicated. They don't add too much. Like I think Outwit, given the way the game rules work at the moment, I think it was maybe a little bit too grey area in terms of how it actually works. Like I think most of the time people can understand Outwit at a very base level, but then when you start looking at the more nitty gritty of it, it becomes a lot more fuzzy. On the rulebook side of it, yeah, like do we have a comprehensive rulebook that literally details everything? Because I don't think we do. And if we do,
No.
here's where it is.
We have the living rules, which does go into everything.
It doesn't it just detail what each keyword basically does? It's like a glossary.
Yeah, so it goes through each of the keywords. It goes through what they do, and then we have the FAQ, which highlights problematic situations such as things like enormous axe doesn't trigger if it's face down.
Yeah. So, like again, taking Magic for example, there would be a general rulebook, which is like your sort of surface level stuff. And then there will be a Magic comprehensive rulebook, which would be like a 50-page document away for the shit, right? And that's the sort of thing I think should exist, to have all these things codified, because there is to me too much hand wavy. We sort of know how it's supposed to work, so we're going to accept that's how it works, right? Like there was
rules
a long
as understood as opposed to rules as written.
Exactly, and they should be codified, right? For example, Godzilla, right? Didn't actually work, but nobody ever played it the way it was actually worded and the way the rules should effectively have specified it worded, because everyone fucking knew what it meant, right? Everyone knew Godzilla blow up everything. The way it worded meant actually no, it only blows up your stage. Similarly, Ice Sword Execution, like everyone knew what that card was supposed to do, and everyone played it the way it was supposed to be played. But like, you could have happily, there was no reason why at a certain point, if that hadn't been ruled in a codified rulebook of when you get into like a top level tournament saying, nope, that's not how that card works, you only commit yours, right? There's just a lot of that hand wavy stuff that I think needs to be codified. Yes. And most of our players play to the intent. But I do think there needs to be a properly codified rulebook, and it's baffling that one does not exist.
Yeah.
So I'll just repeat that. So the most recent example would be Levi's Rampage, where I thought you could lock it in the carpool. Murray has corrected me on this, but according to what Guile said in other places, you can lock it in there. So this seems to be a bit of a back and forth. Hopefully we get an FAQ on that. And it's kind of like led to this thing of where I've started to notice that the rules are subjective. The judging is subjective. And we need, for a competitive card game, it shouldn't be a subjective ruling system. But for locals, when you're dealing with locals, if people make wrong calls, that's fine. But if that costs you a world seat next year because the judges got misinterpreted something,
you're still muted, apparently.
I shouldn't be. Unless the stream's dead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry, kind of saying you're back.
It might just be stream delay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
But
I think one of the things that they're trying to figure that out is like Colossal Detonation, with the new SR from Origins of Power.
Yeah.
Now says destroy all foundations in all stages. So I think they're trying to clear that up in the card effects. But I agree that if they're not going to like errata these, well, they are like errataing them to say you have to do it in every stage. Sometimes things like that, I guess, get missed in design and play testing and stuff because, like you said, they know how it's supposed to work, but it never gets actually written down to how it does work. And I do agree that we need a more centralized, updated system because when you start making some of these more complex cards like Levi's Rampage, which is another card as soon as I saw it, I knew I had to break it. You're going to have people who do stuff like that. That Colossal Detonation.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I've got a video
coming
out soon, which is just me talking about the retro deck I had so much fun with regionals, which was Mina 1 Titans. And I wanted to loop unexpected outcomes and thermal blast and just get to go, you don't get to play the game. And because that's when I had the same like inspired moment when you saw a Levi's Rampage. When I saw Thermal Blast, I was like, I need to put this in Mina 1 and I need to make someone cry.
Yeah, I just need to break this. Because there are people who see a card and they're like, I'm going to figure out exactly how I can break this. I'm one of those people. So again, UVS Games, if you're watching, send me an NDA. I'll break any card you want. I will stress test whatever you want me to stress test, and we'll work this out together. We'll find the cracks and we'll fill them in.
It's an important role, especially if you want to make retro competitive. You need to know what's going to be broken in retro.
Yeah, I mean,
tell me about it.
Yeah, so I think that looking at a card and being excited and having that fuel imagination and as things you can do about it, that's part of the joys of this game, right? That's one of the reasons I play it, is that you get to look at something and go, oh, I can do this really cool thing, whether that's like, playing a 13 diff off Mina 1, right? Or finding your Levi's, playing, like, it was literally talking with Gary, one of my locals, sort of in the car the other day of, the Levi's Rampage locking the building combo and just sort of trying to play some sort of Mount Lady 3 shell where you defend forever, snap loads of momentum and then just go off, right? And that's, probably not a competitive thing, but probably a fun thing, and that's again part of the joy of this game. And I think they're not being a codified rulebook, and the fact that they leave this stuff right until the last minute, which is also part of the problem when it comes to like the set based FAQs. Like this should come out before the set is released.
Yeah, probably as soon as the card is previewed.
Yeah,
Because people are going to have people like us. We're going to have these questions.
Yeah, once the full spoiler is out, that's when they should be ready to do it, right?
Well, as Connor said in chat, they haven't even updated the living rules and everything with Outwit yet. One of my biggest complaints for this year was they banned Mob Strike and Errata Younger to go after April, and it wasn't updated in the rules for months. So it's like, unless you'd seen the announcement or could find the article, if you went to the bans and Errata list, they weren't up there, so people could have possibly played that wrong. But
yeah,
just
like those, there just isn't the resources that should exist.
Just to circle back to what you were just saying there, Richard, genuine question for both of you. How are you actually finding like the inspiration behind the game? Because, I mean, for the last 2 years, I've been known as that weird guy that plays off the meta cuff stuff with Dabby and Mina and Midnight. And this year, just not had the inspiration. I've looked at the cards and I've not had that inspiration of, this is a cool combo, this is something I need to play. In retro, I have. I played my Dabby Reversal, I played my Mina Titans, but at the minute for like standard, I don't know if it's because there's so many cards or because there's so many abilities. I'm just not seeing anything that makes me immediately go, this is cool, I need to play it. Dabby Titans was the closest I got, and I kind of forced myself to be enthusiastic for that.
Yeah. Again, there was sort of a similar discussion that was on our local sort of group chat was, just a lot of things at the moment are very just stats. There's no interesting gameplay loops, thinking about like even just like the sort of weird manipulation type stuff like Momo 1 used to do, right? Obviously she was very strong, but she used to do a lot of kind of messing around and pressing lots of buttons, and there isn't really room, especially from a meta perspective, for a lot of button pressing. Like I think there are certainly interesting things, like there's certainly things that have like, I want to play this. Like for example, I like the idea of giving Attack Titan's Haymaker stun 4 in Paul. I like the idea of going dual needle lunge into Duel of the Ackermans in Death Arms, right? So there's been these odd bits and bobs, but there's not really a lot of button pressing characters or strategies around. Like the Irwin deck was probably the closest to it, but again, that was very based on the casino package, which probably I'm not entirely convinced is necessarily healthy.
That's why you just play Present Mike 2 and mill him out.
Yeah, like we didn't have there's not really. Obviously, Overhaul exists, but I think people just kind of got fed up of him. Like I'm pretty sure he's probably still pretty good, but I think people just had enough of him, right? I don't know. Like, I think if they're going to bring new mechanics in, it has to be worth it. I think Blitz is a fine. Frenzy is a fine one for challenger decks because it doesn't really add too much to that mental load. I think part of maybe the sort of deck building fatigue or stuff is exactly what Connor's saying in chat in terms of the symbol choice with we've just had 2 big sets, which is only 6 of the symbols. And I think that's been a bit of a problem from that deck building and meta perspective. But like, I think this probably like the crux of all of this, I think, is AOT, right? And all of the shots that UVS took with AOT. And how they have landed and affected both the game as a whole and looking at it as a more sort of meta landscape perspective. And like after the summit we had, I was hopeful. Like, you know, I was trying. You know, I wanted to be positive. You know, I wanted everything to work. I was hopeful that they had a plan and I could see a path to success with it. Being brutally honest, I don't think any of it has worked. I think Blitz is a mechanic that would work if it was built from the ground up in the game. I think with the way we currently have the game, where it's kind of a mix, I think it just adds little value in terms of simplifying the game, and if anything, overcomplicates it. And I think it takes away interesting interactions in the game in terms of, and I think it takes away some of the sort of the draw for new players. Like one of those, you know, I think I've talked about this before, is one of those things that I think can draw in a new player is when they and we talked about this. I think it was the Clash decks, the Jin and June ones, of when they see how the things interact and they sort of feel clever in terms of seeing that interaction of, if I play this thing first and then do this, I then get the bonus, and then and you get that thing wording, and that's where you kind of bite into a player's brain of how, you know, the kind of serotonin. I made buttons work, right?
Yeah.
And I think Blitz takes a lot of that kind of agency out of being able to order your things in the correct, even if it's like a really fucking obvious thing, right? I think it just takes some of that agency out of being able to do that. And like, not even necessarily like Dan in chat is saying the back and forth, not even a case of the opponent, right? You know, we're not talking about enhanced chicken here. We're talking about, I want to do the thing that says, like for example, let's take a card like Midst of Despair, right? That says if you've gained life, it gets +3 speed on a Blitz. Well, if you play it as your first attack, that doesn't work. But I could say, if it was an enhance, I could play that as my first attack. Sacrifice Foundation to Immortal Shapeshifter, trigger, gain life, excellent. And now give it the speed with Blitz. And, you know, you've done the thing. You know,
is that also a balancing mechanic where it basically allows you to create more powerful abilities because they have to be preceded or they have to have met that condition before the ability's already been played? I like Blitz.
You could do those on a power level basis via either a response or a static, right? If it was I don't want Midst to be an enhance because I don't want them to be able to trigger that on their first attack, then you could do it you could do it as first enhance, or you could do it as a static that says if you gain life this turn, it comes in with +3 speed, or you could do it as a response, right? I don't know. I just think, and I think from a new player perspective, I think Blitz in theory works, in practice doesn't, in terms of making things easier. I think it just adds another layer to their learning that is basically unnecessary.
So my hot take, which I'm probably going to get some flack from everyone, is Blitz had its purpose before they printed a cancel. When Blitz was just, your attack gets to do what it's supposed to do, and you get to resolve these abilities, and then you move on to enhances. Yes, it was a mental load nightmare because some of these Blitzes were two of, and I did a video where I was talking about Levi's Shell game, where you can literally just go Blitz, pick up an attack, first enhance, pick up an attack, overload your opponent's mental load by just bombarding them with responses and abilities. But when you print an action which cancels Blitzes, you've just made them into responses and enhances. When you just get to go, you can negate what this attack's trying to do. You've removed the purpose of what you said Blitz was for. And as much as I know it was needed, and some of these Blitzes were insane, and this action will see play, it stops the entire purpose of Blitz.
No, I mean, I think if you're sold on Blitz being a thing, I think having the action as a way of interacting with it is totally fine. I just think Blitz doesn't. There is probably a percentage of benefit from Blitz in terms of that new player learning mental load experience, but I think the sort of positives that it brings do not outweigh the negatives it brings, both for enfranchised players and new players. I think them having to learn Blitz and the enhanced step, and like the fact that when you start looking at standard and looking at things like, okay, I've played my Blitz, my card is now done. Well, no, because there's still responses on it. Well, no, because it's still got EX. No, because it's still got stun. Like, I don't know what, in that world, like in a world of, we have built this as a AOT1 is the first ever set for UVS, and we just have Blitz. I think that's fine. The fact that that's not the world we live in, I think, is the problem. So I don't think Blitz solves the problem you want it to. And I think ultimately it's been a failure, personally. And I would can it.
I can see that. I think one of my main problems with Blitz is that it's a timing-based keyword. It is not it is technically an enhanced in the enhanced step. But if Blitz had its own step, like you have the response window, the Blitz window, then the enhanced step, I think it might be a little bit better, because I do see what they were saying where we want attacks to be able to do at least something so that new players feel like they're doing something, and it's not, oh, I have to play around all of your responses. It's, hey, this attack is going to do what this attack says it's going to do. That's all well and good. But like you said, once they start introducing ways to interact with Blitz, well, then it's just like another enhance. So at that point, you know, why not just make them enhances? But also, I cannot tell you, even with experienced players, how many times I've had to say it's response, Blitz, enhance, not Blitz, response, enhance. So many times people have gotten like tripped up, like, I'm going to play this, I'm going to do the Blitz, okay, responses. I'm like, well, no, technically it's a response first to the card being played, and the Blitz is at the start of the enhance. Not giving Blitz its own window, I think, was a problem.
And that's
because it's still in the enhanced step. But then how do you explain, okay, it's kind of like an enhance, but it's not. It's a timing difference, but it's all in the same step. And that can also be confusing to a newer player. I get the whole trying to simplify it. This attack's going to do what it says it's going to do. You know, new players can do the thing. That's a neat idea in concept. Instead of, okay, do I have to, with every single decision I make, worry about what you're going to do? But at the same time, kind of like what Richard was saying, it in some ways complicates things more than it simplifies them.
Mm-hmm.
Both with like the timing thing, trying to remember, okay, I have responses before blitzes, because with your Midst of Despair argument, if they wanted to stop it from being +3 speed on your first turn, they shouldn't have printed refreshing life or whatever, the one that says at response after you play an attack, gain a health.
Yeah, and that would be
if you're trying to lock that stuff like that to where, okay, this is a situation where I don't want this to be available, but you're printing cards that make it available anyway. So it kind of means like you're working against yourself a little bit in that regard.
Yeah, and the other thing that Blitz does is it creates a gotcha moment, right? So let's say I am playing in a tournament and I want to win, and I'm a nasty, nasty man, and I'm going to not cheat, but I'm going to be an absolute rule stickler, and I'm playing against a newer player round 1 in Nationals, and they play their attack, and they say, Blitz, do my thing. You're enhanced. I'm like, okay, pass. Let's go to blocks. And they're like,
yeah,
wait, I haven't done my enhance. I'm like, well, you gave me enhance. That's implied that you're passing because you had first enhance. Therefore, I will also pass. You go to block step.
And as Cameron said, people miss the timing triggers as well. So if they go, like on female type attacks, they'll go, okay, I'll ready a backup draw card, but I've got responses. Like, no, you've done your blitz. You don't get to respond now. You've missed your response window.
Yeah, I mean that would be the same as an enhance, right? So
Yeah.
but like I think it does create more gotchas. Now, obviously, I'm almost certainly never going to do that in a tournament unless it's against.
But somebody will.
But there are people who
someone could,
yeah. I need to, and like in sort of defense of that, in a high stakes tournament, you're just playing by the rules. Sure.
This is the difference between getting to Worlds or not.
Yeah.
But as a game that
community would say, you get first enhance, remember? And they're like, oh yeah, shit, right? In the same way that, and I do this all the fucking time, is I will play a card and I'll say, do you have any responses? Well, I'm like, actually, no, I've got a response, and like I don't, because I'm just so used to asking response from my opponent from like other games, right? It's just kind of muscle memory.
Do you have any responses to my check?
Yeah.
The fact that plays the card.
The attack thing.
And because you're now saying, I do my blitz, and then I do my enhance, and then my opponent gets to go, it's just not intuitive to have that. I get 2 goes in one, and then my opponent gets to go in what otherwise was this back and forth. It's a back, and it's just, I understand the idea behind it. I appreciate the sentiment and I appreciate what they were trying, and I just think it's failed. And that's a shame, but I think it's failed.
I think Blitz can also lead to an information overload, as I said in our Levi scam video. With cards that have multiple Blitz effects, your opponent used to not be able to interact with it. So if you had an attack with 2 Blitz effects, you go, cool, Blitz. You pick up a foundation blitz. I get +1 damage for each card in your hand. Enhance, do this, and it's like, okay, those 3 abilities have just come at me, and there was no window for me to even process that information. Now with this interaction action, they have to give you a response kind of thing, so you do get to process a little bit more. But that adds more time into your turn, which is really annoying. And I think blitz is fine. But again, like I'm saying, it's just been kind of mishandled. I think Blitz had a lot of potential, but they've put too much into it too quickly. We didn't need an entire 2 sets of pure Blitz. It should have been...
No, I disagree. I think if they were going to do it, they did it the way they should have done it, of go all in and see if it works. And I just don't... And unfortunately, I don't think it has. What's that?
They needed to simplify the abilities. They needed to make it not as mentally taxing, not have multiple blitzes. Like, with one of the blitzes, like the Levi's overhead strike, where it's like your opponent picks up a foundation, then you blitz and get 1 damage. If it was just your opponent picks up a foundation and then you get 1 damage for each, just make it 1 ability.
Yes, but part of it, because they're... Part of it is they've got to walk a tightrope here, right? Of they were trying to simplify the game and make it an easier journey for someone to learn and get invested in this game, or at the same time not ruining the game for current invested players. And I think, unfortunately, that didn't work out. Like, I think they needed. So, for example, in that enhance. Right, I think it's nice to have that choice, because it might be a case that there are no cards in hand. So it's like, well, actually, I don't. Or they've got like a really good block foundation on stage. So you're like, okay, I'm just going to give it the damage. I'm not going to let you pick up a thing and blah blah blah. So like, I think it's nice having that choice. But I think it is fair that they went all in to see how Blitz worked, because I think in a world where it played off, in the world where it succeeded, I think just having a world of blitz and, responses and statics and stuff. And, sure, you keep your keywords, but everything's just a blitz. If it worked, I think that would have been fine. I just don't think it's worked. And I think for me, I would abandon ship. I don't know. And obviously, it's tricky from that perspective. Like if you're a few months into AOT meta, you've got the feedback and everyone fucking hates blitz. Well, we've already designed our sets a year and a half in advance. That's kind of tricky to pull back on. So, I don't envy UVS from that perspective. If internally they are also of the opinion that blitz hasn't worked, it just sort of.
I think how I would do it. I think if they had made blitz its own timing window, response window, blitz window, enhanced step, and they had simplified the blitzes so they weren't quite so damaging or game breaking, you still get your uninteractable ability, which feels good, but it's not something that's going to hemorrhage the game. It's something that's going to be too good, and then you still have enhances on the card that the enhances maybe are the good abilities that can be interacted with, but you still have these uninteractable things, and it gets its own window so that it doesn't confuse people with timing and the enhanced step and stuff like that.
And then I guess what benefit you're getting from blitz, right? The whole point of blitz was to remove enhances on attacks, right? And just have so that as a newer player, I play my attack, it does the thing, we move to enhanced step, right? That was the kind of the thought process and the flow that they were envisioning from how this worked. I play my attack, I play my Colossus Titan attacks. It adds 2 card momentum. It always does that, and now I can sort of look at the rest of and we only have to worry about the stages at that point. We're not having to worry about enhances, and we're just kind of trying to do some upfront loading in terms of we clear that stuff out the way, and now we're playing enhances on our stage, right? They want to just attack through the thing, enhance on stage. And I think in a world where you built from the ground up, that could work. I think if you're going to a half and half route, what's the fucking point of blitz? It doesn't do anything. You also run into, if you add it as its own in its own window, well then you've got how does flash work in that instance?
That's another reason I say give it its own window, because if you say skip this card's enhanced step, which is what flash does, you don't get blitzes.
Well, you
know,
but if you have response. What was that?
That's what I was going to say about yours. Under yours, you would still get the blitzes.
Yeah,
because you would response. Cool. Yeah, cool. Response, cheerleader. I'm going to give your attack flash. Cool. I move to blitz. I'm going to get this blitz ability, and now we skip my enhanced step. But under the rules, because blitz is at the beginning of the enhanced step, cards that can give other cards flash completely negate blitz as a theory. So your card that's supposed to do what it's supposed to do doesn't get to do what it's supposed to do.
What's the difference between blitzes and responses at that point?
You would have very little ways to interact with blitzes like you normally do right now, until we just got those 2 actions that can cancel blitzes. But if they were supposed to be...
There's very little ways to respond with responses as well. So it kind of creates that same situation as, why isn't blitz just response if it has its own window?
Yeah,
honestly, I think blitzes should just be responses, but that's just me.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to defend it from the company's point of view and what they were trying to explain. They wanted something that was something you didn't interact with very well. We didn't have cards printed that could negate blitzes like we do have cards that can negate responses. So they wanted.
I don't think it was that.
You can't really.
I don't think it was
from what I read in the articles. They said we wanted the attacks to be able to do something up front, guaranteed, so that new players felt better about it.
Okay.
At least in some of the earlier articles, but honestly, I don't think blitz needed to be a thing.
No, like I said, I think
because then you still got to worry about keyword abilities, and then those are just a different color word on the card. Okay, what's that? Well, that's an enhance. Okay, well, what's an enhance? If you're not printing enhances on the attacks and stuff, from a new player just picking it up, it could be a little confusing that way. That's one of the reasons I had trouble learning Magic way back in the day, because I saw a card with 6 words in italics. I didn't know what any of them meant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then again, that was 10 years ago when Magic's been already going on for like 25 years. So
Yeah.
again, if I had gotten in on the ground floor, I'd probably know what was going on. But
I mean, I can
yeah,
get.
it's just one of those. They tried.
Yeah, I can get where you're
Yeah,
coming from.
yeah. Like I said, I don't fault them for trying at all. I just don't think it's worked.
I can get where you're coming from with making attacks do what they want. For example, Determined Advanced Godzilla lets that character do what it wants without you interacting with it, where you go, I play Determined Advanced, I get momentum, I spend that momentum to give my next check +2. You have momentum hate, but you don't get to use it because I get to do what my deck's supposed to do. But at the same time, you're taking away that control aspect that players come across. They knew Godzilla was going to be at the event. They knew they needed momentum out, and you've basically shut down the other side. It's one of those things that it's opened up some aspects of deck building, but also shut down control players from actually having the control that their decks kind of want.
Yeah, like I should be able to flash and determine advance and it not get its momentum, like with a cheerleader.
I don't think it
game
needs its
plan.
own response like window, but
I just think Blitz, it's you just get rid of it and you either become enhances, responses, or statics, depending on what the Blitz ability is. And I think it's unfortunate, and it might be a case of, you know, the sort of too far down the road with it. I don't know. I can't really comment on that from the company perspective, but personally, I would abandon ship and just accept that it's there and it will go away eventually.
I don't think it will. I think Blitz is going to be around for a while.
Well, I think if it's a failure and the general community think it's a failure and it hasn't, and I think and you know the company will have a better, you know, barometer of this than I will in terms of how it's actually done the thing they wanted it to do in terms of helping new players on board. If it's achieved their goal from that perspective, my not particularly liking it doesn't matter. If it's achieving their goals, then fine, right? I'm not convinced it has, and if it hasn't, then I think just, you know, you shouldn't sort of get sucked into sunk cost fallacy here of we've done it, we've started, we're going to finish. I think you just sort of have to abandon ship.
That leads to a question of what was their goal. If their goal was to simplify the game for onboarding, Blitz has done that to an extent.
Has it?
It's brought more players in. It's only once players get more established with the games and understand the intricacies of how the game is mastered that you start to move away from blitzes. But I mean, Attack on Titan has brought in a lot of more interest into the game. I mean, the star I went to in Wales got a lot more interest because of Attack on Titan. The blitzes in the new in the new decks from Challenger and Clash made it easier for them to understand and to get their head around. But once they started moving on to the other decks and they got onto the Godzillas and the Spikes, and they realized that once they got their head around the actual game, and then saw how more complicated the game could get, that's when it was more, well, why do we need Blitz? It's onboarding people, but it's if the goal was to onboard people by making the introduction to the game simpler, it's done that. But while we still have enhancers and stuff around, those will always be more appealing because it leads to more interesting interactions.
Yeah, if it genuinely has helped people bite into this game in terms of, I like the Attack on Titan OP, blitzes have made my life easier to learn this game, so I'm sticking around. Great, that's fine. Again, I don't know whether this is an option, but maybe. So, for example, like the Jin and Jun decks, I think they are a great product from a starter introductory perspective, right? Obviously, the Attack on Titan ones were a fucking disaster because the characters were so terrible. But I think the Jin and Jun ones, have a little bit of juice in them, but are pretty simple. And I think they would be the ideal product to have blitzes and
available globally now.
Yeah, US just got theirs like 2 weeks ago, so now available globally.
And maybe
Apparently, my store didn't get the email that they got delayed, so that was fun.
Yeah, so like, but then it's the question of, well, then we're still in this world of we've got both, and actually rather than removing from the mental load for the newer players, actually you're adding to it. So I just think it's one of those things that if you were designing from the ground up and it was just AOT was our first ever product and we just have blitzes, I think that's fine. But I think in a mixed world of blitzes and enhances, it fails. Now, it may well be that, by the time we get to the point where, AOT 1 is the first set in our standard rotation and we are just in a mono blitz world, it's fine. But again, we've still got EX, we've still got powerful, we've still got stun. So you've got to have that, right? You play your attack, you do your blitzes, and it doesn't have enhances. Unless it's got EX, the stun, and blah blah blah.
But
so you might have responses.
Yeah, those aren't enhances. Those are French vanilla abilities, as they put in the article. Those are
EX.
EX is a French vanilla ability. It's
sure, but you still play it as an enhance, right?
Yeah, you still play as an enhance,
So-
but it's not. It's not an enhance that is unique. It is something that appears quite regularly.
Yeah.
So it's something a player can pick up on. It's not like a Twisty Azor enhance, which completely changes the way that the game.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're complex, right? I'm just saying that you are still in a mixed bag world where you can't just play your attack and then ignore it, right? Which is sort of what Blitz wanted to do, right? They wanted to play your attack in your card pool, resolve the abilities on the attack, go to enhanced step from your stage. That was sort of the goal, and I guess hand. Whereas,
But then they printed the cancel.
what's that?
But then they printed the cancel, which means it completely negated that aspect of Blitz, where it's like you play the attack, it does its thing, and then you move to the French.
No, you can still interact with it, right? Like you can still. That doesn't preclude interaction. It says I do my blitz. My opponent might interact and cancel it with the cancel, right? But then once that is done, we are now doing an enhanced step from our stage and hand. We're not looking at our attack in the card pool as part of that. That's sort of the goal of once the attack's in play and we pass that blitz step, we are now just in the world of enhances from stage.
So I just got very distracted by Cameron just pulling his hands up from the bottom of the screen in a very suggestive manner.
Yes,
he likes to visit me when I'm recording. He likes to sit in my lap. So
Yeah.
Well, the computer's warm, so that makes sense.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't hate Blitz. I just think it's failed, and that's unfortunate.
for me, I think it's one of those. I can see what they were trying to do, but I do agree. I think it made things a little bit more complicated than they had intended.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where I just, as someone who tries to teach, I try to see through all sides of things. I'm like, you tried, and I see what you were going for, but I don't know if I necessarily agree with it. I did not like making my Blitz video for the Hermit School, trying to explain that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, I don't fault them for taking the shot. I don't fault UVS for trying with Blitz, and I appreciate what they were trying to achieve. I just think it's like, well, we tried and we failed, and we're just treat it like Storm or Fraction.
Do you think it came at the wrong time as well?
We're never doing it. It came at the wrong time. No, I don't think so. I think
we just had the Godzilla where we got combined firepower, lots more in-depth interactions with enhances and remove abilities and interaction with discard. And the game got a bit more complicated, and then they went into we're going to make the game simpler. And it's like, well, you just give us all this new interaction, and even within the set, you give us discard and remove interaction. And you're taking one aspect of the game nobody was complaining about and going, we're going to make that simpler, but everything else is going to get more complicated.
I think you're misunderstanding the goal here, right? And I did talk. I have talked about this before, ages ago. Of they never really wanted to remove the complexity from the game, right? There was never. We don't want to dumb this game down. That wasn't, I don't think, the goal. They still want the kind of peak of complexity to be there. They just wanted the learning curve of getting to that peak to be a lot easier. right? They still
Yeah.
want you to be able to do cool things in the game and have excellent back and forth and excellent interaction and do really interesting deck building and do cool things. They just wanted that journey to get there to be a lot easier, and that was what Blitz was trying to do. Is what like the AOT one sort of Brave New World was trying to achieve, of just kind of lowering that gradient of that step from I've just had the demo to I'm playing standard, right? There is a big old step, right, of being able to competently and say, you know, I can sit down and I can play this game and against anyone, and I might lose, but I'm in the fight. Up here to I've just played the demo deck, right? There is a that curve was so steep that many people were just like, yeah, I'm giving up climbing, and that was what they were trying to stop. Of actually, if we can lower that gradient, people are going to be like, okay, it's a bit uphill, but I get it, and I can see the top of the hill. I can see that I'm getting up there, right? And that's, I think, what they were trying to achieve.
Yeah, to make it less of a Sisyphean
I just
feat.
don't think Blitz is achieving that.
I think the demo
Personally.
did, but I'll let Cam say what he wants to say about what I brought up.
I think one of my main issues, like when you say did it come at the wrong time, I think they tried to do too much too quickly with all of the different changes in Attack on Titan. Attuned symbols, less symbols in the set, backups are a new thing, Blitz. I think had it been one or two of these things, it would have been okay, and then the next one, okay, now we're going to add the other two. We're going to slowly introduce this. I think it's the fact that they dropped so much at one time that I think some of the newer players, or not newer players, but the people who haven't been playing maybe as long as I have, but have been in like the My Hero age, like when they started with My Hero, were kind of scrambling to learn all the new stuff, and therefore like things could get taught wrong and stuff like that. So when your player base is struggling to keep up with all of the new things in this one set, I think it could be a little tricky. And I think one of the reasons to have such a huge set, I thought we were going to have another reset like we did with My Hero Academia, because that first My Hero Academia set was actually power scaled to old standard, now retro, which is why some of those cards are freaking insane.
Yeah.
And they decided to hard reset the game there and build up. I think if we had hard reset at Attack on Titan 1, you would have lost a lot of people. But
Yeah.
I agree with what Richard was saying with how some of these newer abilities and cards and how you want the game to progress clashes with some of the pre-existing stuff that's still very relevant. And that can be kind of a way where it's bashing heads, and it's like, okay, there's where some confusion can come from. If we had hard reset and we had keyword abilities and blitz, and that was all we had on our attacks, just blitzes and maybe like stun, throw, powerful EX. That was it. Maybe breaker. Maybe. And you didn't have to worry about all the other old stuff. Like when we lost multiple and reversal going into My Hero, people were upset. But then we got Echo, which is multiple light, and in my opinion, a much better keyword ability, because you don't have to explain how everything has to go exactly in the correct order in the discard pile, and that's a whole mess.
Mhm.
But, well, now you don't have to do that anyway, because
Yeah,
now it
they
takes
changed
multiple
the
from the top of the deck, because they had to change the rules to make it easier. But when you have more simplified versions of these, I think it's better. I'm still waiting for a more simple version of Reversal, because
We all
Reversal
are.
was
We all are.
asinine. Like explaining just how that response window breaks down to a new player, you can see the gears kind of grind to a halt for a second, especially when there are some characters that make that nigh impossible, i.e. Zheng Hua from Soul Calibur 6. Nightmare of a character to play against. So just disgusting. But yeah, if we had hard reset at Attack on Titan with that big set, and maybe had like the clash decks or the starters be actual starters, not just cards from the set, which I didn't mind, but like you guys said, the characters were really ugh. But maybe that could have solved some problems where it's like, okay, we are starting over. This is how we're designing going forward. It might have worked a little bit better, but because you have to contend with all this other stuff, the Twisting Azure Infernos and any of these crazy cards that are still meta legal, even with our new rotation system, which thankfully we are now on a 3-year rotation as opposed to a 10 set. That makes me so much happier. Yeah, that can cause a lot of confusion as to how certain abilities can work and how you power level or scale some of these newer abilities. And like I said, had they not spent 2 months telling us how they were going to simplify things and then spent the next 5 or 6 sets dropping 1 to 6 new abilities or interactions or timing keywords per set, I probably wouldn't be as mad.
So I think in terms of a reset, they were trying to have their cake and eat it. And I don't think it worked out. So they almost wanted it to be a reset without it being a reset in terms of Spotlight, right?
Yeah.
They wanted to push Spotlight.
Yeah. And I think that was, again, a fair direction to take off. We want this format that new players can come into and then sort of almost graduate from that standard and have this be something that invested players can, get the new cards and play in as well as standard and stuff. However, there were a few issues with that really, I think, sunk it. Like, I don't know how much Spotlight is being played, if at all, to be honest. So firstly...
Personally, for Attack on Titan, our groups have sworn off Spotlight after the one tournament we had to have it.
Yeah.
Because Smiling Titan showed up and no one had a good time.
Yes,
including the Smiling Titan player. He did not like playing Smiling Titan.
So my question to both of you then, you were talking about if we just had like the abilities in Attack on Titan, if it was a reset sort of thing, this would have gone over a lot better. Do we think the original plan was to have the second half of this year be Attack on Titan Spotlight competitively?
No. So the issue with Spotlight, as you said, Smiling Titan was a massive outlier, I think.
Yeah, there were outliers.
Yeah.
It's fine now. It's all good.
Card design...
To be fair, had I not missed a response, yes, I would have been okay with Smiling Titan, but I missed a response last week. But they're playing anime in my store. I wasn't paying attention.
There are issues with the format in terms of power outliers and negative play experiences, i.e. Smiling Titan, but also play groups aren't really huge and don't necessarily meet up often, right? So I don't know whether you've got just the sort of the real estate from an LGS perspective to really support it, unless someone really wants to drive it, and it was never really good enough or fun enough to really want to drive it. The 300 card set, the fact that there's so much chaff and filler in the set. I don't think there was really much interesting stuff to really explore in a Spotlight format. So it was almost a bit dead on arrival. And then especially when you've got extreme power outliers like Smiling Titan, especially in Spotlight, in standard, you can referee jury, you can cape, and you can have answers, which just basically didn't exist in Spotlight. And people want to play standard. They want to play the characters they want to play. That's the whole point of the game, right?
Yeah. But
outside of competitiveness, one of the big draws of this game is I fucking love Tenuida. I'm just going to play Tenuida in whatever format he's legal in, and while Tenuida is legal, I'm going to play a Tenuida deck. And I'll put some Attack on Titan cards in, cool, and I'm going to try and pick up Attack on Titan cards that I can play in my Tenuida deck I sort of will just play whatever, but there are a whole big part of the sort of pie of players of this game who just really fucking love a character, right? And will just play that.
I get that, and
Like Nabi.
Yeah, like that. But I was kind of forced into being Debbie. That's a whole video for no whole different time. But the main reason I asked if this half was going to be like Spotlight is generally I would agree with your points that this game is designed for people who want to play characters, love for the IPs they love. But are we forgetting that at the beginning of this year they wanted to force half of Swiss to be draft? They wanted to cut off people from playing halfway through the Swiss and go, now you're drafting, now you're stuck with whatever set is the most recent. And that deters from everything you've just said.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a bit of the head not knowing what the hand was doing, like, left hand not knowing what the right hand was doing, and some pretty bad decisions and not particularly well thought through decisions from that OP side. Obviously, draft and limited players is its own monster, but yeah.
And I think that was one of the main issues with Attack on Titan Set 1 is I think they designed it with that old OP standard in mind, where we're going to have some that are standard in draft, some that are standard and sealed. So they wanted to design a set that worked in draft, standard, and sealed, and all of that. And then that's why we get a whole bunch of chaff stuff, a whole lot of blank cards. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it sometimes, and UVS Games, if you're watching this is not a knock, but sometimes I feel like they're trying to be bigger than they are. Like they're trying to be 100%. One of the big three, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, something that has this monster of a machine that they can work with when they're a much smaller machine. And it feels like they're trying to push some bigger ideas that either the community is not ready for or they as a company might not be ready for. Like with all these different formats. Okay, that's fine to do, like if you've got some new locals, do a Challenger Series tournament. That's fine. Gets people to spend money in the store, and that's fun for newer players. But for stuff like that, some of the higher tier competitive people, I can't remember who I was talking to about this, but we were talking about, like, we want to see a retro Nats. We want to see a team Nats. We want each of these to have their own stage, but obviously the company's way not big enough for that to be able to just have the bandwidth for all of this, because you need judges who can specifically answer retro questions or teams rules questions, stuff like that. And like Richard was saying with like the rule books, we'd have to have all of these rules very well documented, hammered out, and make sure everything's polished and ready to go. And that's why I don't like multi-format tournaments.
Yeah.
Because what if you have someone, hey, this is my first regional. They go to the regional with their standard deck that they've been practicing locally, and then they realize, oh, now I have to know how to draft. And maybe they don't know how to draft. Maybe they just got into this 2 weeks ago. And they were just like, hey, this sounds fun. I played Yu-Gi-Oh! And went to several regionals. I'm just going to go to this regional and test it out. I've been playing for a few weeks. I think I'm pretty good. Well, now there's a whole nother skill set. Or, you have your standard deck, and now you have to build you have to have a spotlight deck with you. And that could add to mental load of players trying to prepare to go to your events. It's like, okay, which event are you going to go to? That one that you can afford to go to because it's closer. And what are the specific rules you need to know and all the different formats you need to know for that one event. And like I said, this year it felt like they were trying to introduce a lot for us, both organized play and design-wise. And while it might have been thought through at the time, they've then had shifts in management with OP and design. So maybe we are having those growing pains of having to deal with what the old team put into place before we could start our new things. And kind of that juggling act of, well, this was designed because of this, and now we see that this isn't going to work, so we're stuck with this. How do we move forward in a way that doesn't just scrap everything so that everything that our players have been forced to learn is now moot? At least it's not moot until it rotates, because you still have to deal with it until it rotates, unless we're just going to ban a whole swath of sets, which seems not very healthy for the game. But how do we move forward balancing this to where it feels like it was what it was intended to do when we tried to do 30 things at once instead of slowly building this up? Like, I like how I'm doing clash decks, which are simple characters, simple cards, but they have potential. And you can play them against each other. Then you move up to challenger decks. A little bit more complex. You get 2 different characters, and you can choose between the 2 different play styles. Then you have like your standard booster sets and all that. There's your little ladder of progression. You do a demo, clash deck, challenge series, and you have that level of learning progression. I think that's a really good idea in how they structured that. But again, sometimes it just feels like they're trying to do way too much at once and not remembering, oh, we have a limited staff. So maybe that's why some of these issues with certain cards aren't getting caught, because maybe some of the staff are having to do multiple things at once and things just fall through the cracks. Things fall through the cracks at like bigger companies and games where there's just this absolutely broken card that somehow got through playtesting. But if they're focused on, does this set play well with itself? Cool. Well, how does it play with the rest of Standard? Well, we focused more on the set itself because that's what like newer players are going to be focused on. Maybe they'll split a box and then try to build decks from there, which I've definitely seen people do. But then you say, hey, this card with this set that was released last year is incredibly busted, and now you have to errata something or ban something. Again, I just think they need some more eyes design-wise to look at things and to hammer out things smoother before it goes to print, like making sure Blitz says something you may do and not what the article says, you have to do your Blitz. Stuff like that, just some proofreading and stuff. But again, they're a much smaller company, so maybe they're still working on getting enough manpower to get more eyes on this thing to make it smoother going forward.
I 100% agree with they're trying to run before they can walk, and their ambition is overextending their reach. I fully appreciate like Paul and the rest of the EVS team and their ambition of wanting to be, the best CCG, and I don't think it's an unreasonable ambition. I just think it's not going to happen overnight, and then it's not going to happen in a big bang, because that's just not how things work. There's too much inertia to get over in terms of like people just being invested in what they're invested, right? I think there's ways and means of going about it, and I think to an extent that there's almost like not knowing what you are in the first place, right? Of that kind of almost like a little bit of an identity crisis of we don't really know what we necessarily are right now, let alone what we could be. And I think there's a certain amount of coming to terms with what we are right now, where we are right now, and what is actually realistically achievable, say, in the next 6 months to a year. And I think the ambition of what they wanted, again, I appreciate it. I just think it was probably unrealistic. Just given the way markets work, especially now, the CCG market was, it was always very much like the big three, right? And then you had a few minor players. But now we've entered such a hugely competitive era as the CCG market, right? We've got things like Lorcana, Star Wars, all the Bandai games, like One Piece obviously being huge, of just these big ones actually being successful at taking big chunks of the market, that it's going to be a lot harder to get that sort of huge growth. So, yeah, I mean, like, I don't know the answers, right? I'm not a marketing manager. I'm not a game designer. But like, yeah, I don't know what the answers are, but it just feels like, yeah, they were trying to run before they walk. And I think that's a surefire way of actually going backwards, and losing ground in that sort of race, as it were. Sure, we've been around for sort of 20 years as a game, or however long. That doesn't mean we can't fail. That doesn't mean we can't die, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing to remember. And like for me, part of that kind of is the sort of the product overload. Like we talked about mental overload in terms of the game rules and mechanics and things, but there's also the product overload side, right? We're talking bigger sets, we're talking more releases and like the challenger decks, and like certainly for me as a pretty enfranchised player, right? The product overload probably makes me buy less rather than buying more, right? There was a period where, so for example, like if you look at sets 1 to 6, I've got play sets of everything because that's how I wanted to build my collection. I liked the idea of just having a play set of every card so I could build whatever deck I wanted. Sets got too big, products became too frequent. It just wasn't financially viable for me to do that. Now I buy far less product on release and I just pick up the cards I want and I don't buy as much. Right? I used to sort of, so like, and it's just so although there's more product in theory I should want to own, I buy less. And I think a lot of people are finding, and I think that product fatigue is a very surefire way of pushing people out of the game. Like for me, it's sort of, there is a bit of a, there's like, I think if a player feels like, okay, I've got like a bit of a window of, there's not so much where I need to keep up, because then they can like, oh, well, maybe I can invest a bit more, and they actually end up buying more. I think that's probably sort of actually how it works. Because part of like what CCG sort of almost run is that kind of FOMO of I need all the new cards and want to play the new thing. There becomes a point where that breaks and it's like, actually, no, there's too much. I can't keep up. I'm not going to bother. And some people just, they'll buy less. Some people would decide, well, I can't keep up with the game anymore. I'm done. I'm selling out. So I think that's a very real risk they need to concern themselves with. I think 3 to 4 sets a year is fine. I think the sporadic challenger decks are fine. I think releasing a set of 4 challenger decks at once is ridiculous, especially at Christmas time.
Yeah.
I think that's a big ask, and I think
the amount of cards in the Challenger series for Star Trek rivals the amount of cards that were in the Tekken 6 set.
And then you need to not only think of it as a player perspective, right? Almost more important is a retailer perspective.
Yeah.
So a retailer, let's say, buys a display of Star Trek decks. Local players, they're like, I can't afford you picking these up. I'm skipping. Said retailer is stuck with these Star Trek decks on their shelves. Well, fuck it, I'm not buying EVS anymore. It's losing me money. And that's a story I could see happening. Are they? Because the moment
my LGS still has. Oh, good.
No, I was going to say the moment an LGS has dead product from a game on their stores, sure, sometimes you end up with 1 or 2 precons, and that's fine as long as you're sort of having a reasonable throughput of them. But the moment you're just left with a dead case, and especially in say something like this where maybe there's 4 decks, right, and you have to buy them as a case of 2 of each. God forbid there is one of these decks, and I haven't gone through all of the deck lists with a fine-tooth comb. Like I say, God forbid there is one of these that everyone wants and nobody else wants the other 3, because that's by far the worst situation. Because what happens is a retailer buys a case, someone buys the 2 copies of that one deck that's actually good, and the other's rot, and that's just horrific. So I just think, it's just a bad release from that perspective. Just not even think about what the cards say or even the IP. Like a set of 4 challenger decks at once, I think is just a really terrible idea.
Yeah, but my LGS currently has League of Villains booster boxes sealed for $30,
Mm-hmm.
or Heroes Clash full booster box $30 sealed. I think one of the issues, like with you saying with the release schedule, is there very much is that shiny new toy syndrome where you want to play with the newer cards that, you got to keep up with the meta. And if your store hasn't sold out of the newer one, the one that just came out like 2 months ago, and they still got 6 boxes, well, if all your players are going for the new thing, all that stuff's just going to sit to waste. And you'd have to discount it at a loss. So I can definitely see that. Back when I first started playing, when the Cowboy Bebop set first dropped and when the Mortal Kombat set first dropped, they actually ran, I can't remember if it was, I think it was UVS Games actually ran, you could buy a case, 6 boxes at pre-order, and you get one of every ultra rare in the set.
Ooh.
And that's what my group did, because we were 4 people strong, sometimes 3 people strong. So we said, okay, we're going to pool our money. We're going to buy this case. And since there was really nowhere around, it might have been Rochester's or CCG that actually did that. I'm not entirely sure. But since there was nowhere around that sold stuff, that's how we did it. We were like, we're going to do a heavy invest at the start because there's not going to be another set drop for 5 or 6 months. We were getting 2, 3 set releases a year if we were lucky. And no supplemental product like Challenger Series or Clash decks or stuff like that. That all came, some sets had structure decks, some didn't. So that was allowed us to actually save up for the next big thing. Cool, we'll do another case. And then we save up 6 months. The next set comes out, we buy a case, and we just split it that way. So you could definitely do stuff like that, make your product last in stores a little bit longer. But I also see that they want to get as many IPs out there as possible to net as many players as possible. But I do agree, product overload is a thing. I think each set I used to order 2 to 3 boxes from my LGS to support the store. Now I only pre-order 1 because that's all I can afford, because I have to keep saving up, and then I have to buy a Challenger Series, and then I got to save up for the next 1 box of the big set. And my store has to buy a certain amount each time from the distributor. If she can't sell it, it just sits there and rots with her 50,000 other Pokemon things that are coming out every week.
I mean, it adds up all the time.
Also,
we've just had Dark Hero Decker, which is $35. Then Clash decks, which is $10 each. Then we go straight into AOT, which is $600 for a case. And then we go straight into $35 each lower decks. Straight after that, we've got solo leveling. Then we go into Nats. Then we go into Worlds. And immediately after Worlds, we've got 3 weeks until we go into Critical Role. And it is just very expensive to be a competitive player at the minute.
Very briefly, I need to run, and I'll be right back, or else I'm going to get myself, because I'm an old man.
Oh yeah, it's just one of those things that I get where you're coming from with that, especially when you got to take into account to get to Worlds next year. You need to travel, you need to go to more locals, you need to attend every kind of major event to get your points, and it's becoming very expensive to be a competitive player, especially for international players who are looking at going, apart from 8 of us, we've got to fly out there ourselves at the moment, which is going to get expensive. But to go back about 30 minutes, what you're talking about, Nats, is I love hearing the stories of old Nats. And it's something that I've said on Facebook, I've said to Josh, I've said to UVS every opportunity I can get. Bring back the way Nats used to be. Friday teams, Saturday main event, and then Sunday for everyone who hasn't topped retro Nats. Let's get a region, we haven't got Nats, and once Nats goes, make them not matter for Worlds. Just have it as its own event where people can go and go, we're the best in our region, outside of regionals, because Nats kind of still made no sense. When it was just the UK playing, yeah, I can understand it, but saying it's the Nationals when it's for Europe makes no sense. Saying it's the Nationals when it's for the entirety of North and South America makes 0 sense. It's not a US Nationals if Canada's showing up. So having this, best team in the region, best retro in the region, would be so cool. It doesn't have to count towards worlds. It doesn't have to do anything. I can literally just be a low stakes casual event where people are going to show up because they love the game and people are going to have a lot of fun.
And you would still have people hunting those championships so they could wear them like infinity rings. Because I would probably be one of them if I could afford it.
My friend got married on the Thursday, and my partner we got invited to the reception, and I was going to miss teams because I was having to drive on the Friday, but unfortunately my partner got called into work for Genshin Impact. So my mother-in-law picked up my kids so I could go up to Sheffield early to take part in teams the day after. And my mum was like, "Why? It's not the event's not till side." It's like, "Yeah, but there's a side event." It's like, so I'm picking fun up from school so you can play in an event that isn't as important as the main event. I went, I deserve a break as well. She's like, okay, that's fine. But yeah, my friend was getting married and stuff, and my entire thing was, I just want to play teams. I'd never played teams before. Yeah. It's so much fun.
Neither have I. Oh. I have never played teams. I've never been able to find a team.
We were Team Depresso. We were Erwin, Dark Deku, and Martial Law. So we were all depressed people. We were all the depressed characters. And then it led to a big discussion between some of the judges as to whether Erwin counts as a depressed player. But yeah.
Yeah, I've never had a chance to play teams, but like retro and all these other things I loved. Since, of course, I played before these were retro cards, they were standard. So I love all the old interactions and all the old characters that are way too busted. And yeah, I always tell people, because they're like, oh, what about, this card that I looked up on VS Ultra? I'm like, that's the bad place, Simba. You don't go there. You sit down in your little kiddie pool for a minute, learn to swim first, then we'll throw you in the ocean. And
then we get to Legacy. Because I bought a box of
I
bought a box of cards off eBay, and I was talking to the Scots, and I was like, "This card looks really cool." Like, yeah, that is a Legacy card. That is a dark place.
Don't do that. It's not. You think retro is insane? Legacy has some stuff I really want to play, but also I'm not gonna do that.
It's that Star Wars prequel thing of the bigger fish. You got standard that gets eaten by the bigger fish. You get that monstrous fish, and that's Legacy. That format's never coming back.
No. There's so many things you'd have to rules lawyer. Like even with retro right now, retro would need its own rules team and rules judges. I mean, they are specifically tailored for retro.
They are getting there. We've got an official ban list back up because before everyone was kind of working off the fan one, and we've got official ratters and bans for retro, which is really cool. And I really do hope it gets more support, and mainly because Richard's never tried it, has no interest in retro, but I think Richard would absolutely love to play Storm of Blades in retro. There's so much abuse you could do with that.
Yeah, especially with a character named Zhang Hua, which is awful, and that character that I said that I hated because it makes teaching people how to do reversals a nightmare. She works off printed 3 damage cards.
Reversal Storm of Blades would be nasty.
Well, have you never seen Zhang Hua?
I've not seen Zhang Hua.
Look that monster up.
How do you spell it?
So can you respond off Storm of Blades off reversal? I assume
if you can give it reversal, yes.
How do you don't have to with Zhang Hua.
How do you spell Zhang Hua?
Zianghua. Xi, yeah, not Z. Yeah, Zhang Hua. She should be a 7-hand, 19 health character with air, void, and water. This card is stupid.
I guess you can't respond off of Storm of Blades because it says as your next form, and if you play Storm of Blades as a reversal, you can't then play a form after it, right?
True, but Zhang Hua says twice per turn after any attack is blocked, you get to play an attack with a printed damage of 3, no check necessary after that attack resolves.
Yeah, so you can
play your Storm of Blades for free, and then as your next form, Storm of Blades ability, and then after that one's blocked, play another Storm of Blades for free, get that ability off. All on your turn with checking for 2 cards.
Yeah, don't forget, Richard, you can reversal or reversal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with Zhang Hua, I'm going to block.
Yeah.
You can't form response off Storm of Blades on your opponent's turn, which would be the dream. You want to
No.
reverse the four blades and then like chain off there. But no, you can't do that.
True, but there, because you don't have to check for Zhonghua's ability, you could just play Storm Blades basically for free and not have to worry about checking that one as your 6th card.
Yeah.
And it's just dumb. And then there are printed damage attacks that have multiple. So you play that on your rival's turn and then multiple out. So you attack them 6 times on their turn.
Yeah.
And you still didn't have to pass the check for that. She's disgusting. And she gives your printed 3 damage attack stun 1 twice per turn.
Yeah, no.
Gross.
Yeah, twice per turn.
Yeah, I had to play against that in my 2nd Worlds tournament, back when Worlds was just free to show up. You show up and you get to play.
Yeah.
And I was undefeated with Akuma 2 until about round 4 when I had to play Kevin Broberg playing Zhonghua, and he killed my undefeated streak.
But yeah, that seems nice. The only really reversal character I've come across was Kurama, and I've been informed that Kurama is a bad reversal character.
Oh, he is. He's got his perks, but they dumbed him down because he was probably going to be really nasty otherwise.
Unfortunately,
because you could just block with
Blade,
any reversal and then play it as a reversal.
Unfortunately, Storm of Blades doesn't share any symbols or Kotal card.
No.
I mean, luckily in Retro, you're not symbol locked. You can play any.
Yeah, but it doesn't share any
chaining,
symbols.
Oh.
I think symbol chaining is probably the one major thing that really puts me off Retro. I just can't be bothered.
Nobody really does it
like
anymore. I've never played against someone who's like playing off symbol. My main character for Retro for like the last 2 years has been
I've
Sega.
4th symboled.
But yeah,
I have 4th symboled characters before, and that shit's insane.
Cards like New Training Method just let you build cards that have no symbols that share with your character. It's crazy.
Characters like Johnny Cage. Yeah, Johnny Cage. Anytime he's hit, you get to build a foundation from your discard pile, just like Recovery Girl.
Yeah,
but I think she says... Yeah. Okay, I didn't know she said that you could normally play, because that was their hand wave of, no, it has to share a symbol. If it said it could be normally played. But yeah, imagine playing a character where none of the cards in your deck share a symbol with your character. But they all share one same symbol with each other. You could technically play that in Retro.
So
because of how symbol chaining, before they changed the symbol chaining rules to where they have to share a symbol with your character, it's like, oh, it just has to share a symbol with everything itself.
Yeah.
So it's like, cool, they're all going to have chaos even though my character doesn't have chaos, and I'm just going to run with it.
So, since we're talking about Retro anyway, how do you feel about the fact characters don't have checks or costs anymore, so they can't go in decks? So when we had Apollon, we were talking about the old tech and stuff, and we talked to old Jin, who gives you plus checks equal to the number of characters you're in stage. And unfortunately, he can't play the new Jin Kazuma, the Hero of Lightning or whatever, because it doesn't have a check or a cost. So it's like, you can't. This is essentially a nerf to a character that could have really used those extra characters.
Who cares? I just don't think you lose much. I don't really care.
Toga 3 took
I
a massive
think
hit.
Toga 4?
Toga 4 took a massive hit, so yeah.
Yeah. I think that if they want to do that, fine, I guess. It's just... It is rough, but it only hurts Retro. And at that point, if you're moving things on to where... Yeah, it's fun to have the All Might deck with all 7 All Mights in it, but... I mean, do you really need that?
Yeah, obviously they recently printed Toga with it, but like I think I'm okay with the idea of just character stacking as a mechanic, and the idea of putting character stack just going again. I think it's much like the tap your character to pay cost of foundation is a rule that exists that just adds very little to the rules and is something you could just get rid of. Like, you know,
Yeah, because they're never going to bring. I don't think they're ever going to bring Gage back. So
no,
But
like
because I think what Gage was supposed to be. Go ahead.
because like a character will look, you know, a new player will look at characters like, why has this got a difficulty in a block zone? It's like, well, you can put them in, and it's like, why? And it's like, well, you don't accept it very specifically. And it's just like, again, just something that doesn't need to exist, and I'm okay with it as a design space. Just going.
My counterpoint to that, especially on the AOT stuff, which, as we've discussed, was kind of designed with a sealed sort of drafted in play. The amount of times I've drafted a deck and gone, I'm 2 cards short. I'm going to have to put 2 characters in. Can't do that anymore. I can't chuck in these 6 checks that don't do anything in my hand but will help me go further in the game. It's very good for sealed if you are in draft, if you like quickly change the symbol you're drafting and then just gone, I need like one extra card in to make my deck legal, because I don't think they have the face downs 2 diff 5 check foundation 4 check foundations anymore. Which I mean, essentially, I'd have to drop from a draft because my deck wasn't legal because I can't put counters in there to fill it up.
Yeah, that's kind of tricky, but I think when it comes to like Gage as the keyword it was, that came about with the 7th Cross set where you had 2 different versions of each character. I think what should have happened was that's where we should have had transforming characters. Because the IP that it's based off of, that's what the characters did. Once you reached a certain gauge meter, you turned your character over to their monster side. So it's basically transforming before transforming. And I think they didn't want to go that route back then, which I didn't understand. I enjoyed Gage when it was more, I'm getting these different versions of the characters, as opposed to these 2 characters that share the same name and the same symbols but have slightly different abilities. I'd much rather do transforming from now on. So when it comes to that, I think that's why they're maybe phasing out character stacking and having characters in your deck to begin with, because then it further simplifies what role your cards have.
At the recent regionals, I came across the 7th Cross character that was an 8-hander with 2 health. And
Taisei! I love Taisei.
Yeah, and
Taisei is my favorite.
I was playing my Mino Titan deck, and I never got momentum to like do the stuff I wanted to do with Merciless Master because it's all replacement effects. And it literally the games came down to who went first, because they weren't blocking any of my attacks, but it didn't matter because as long as they could keep getting their characters through Gage, they were fine. And so I had to basically deal enough damage to them that the amount of characters they were getting I outscaled them with their because all my attacks were basically coming at it was rather I just kept killing them, and it felt like Konosuba, or not Konosuba, ReZero. He just kept dying and coming back until he found the path to kill me, and I did end up winning, but it was so annoying because it's a replacement effect. I don't get momentum, so I just have to keep drawing attacks, and that was an annoying deck.
The first time I built Taisei, I tested a life Taisei against a friend of mine. I was like, hey, I just want to see how long I can make 2 health last. After an hour and a half, he didn't kill me once. I never switched into the second character because I was able to play such aggressive defense as an 8 hand size character.
Yeah.
That's why they don't print 8 hand size characters no more. I mean, I think the first 8 hand size character to be banned was a character that had no abilities. She just had the infinity symbol, so you could Jiffany Jamber.
Yeah.
She had the infinity symbol, and back then that meant you could run any card regardless of symbol, and it was insane.
Yeah, like Bayonet Titan was supposed to be before, but they changed the rules last year because teamwork is busted.
That too, yeah.
But yeah,
and it was also with the old Spirit Shotgun, which says this attack gets, I think, like +2 damage for each symbol it shares with your character in your card pool. And with Infinity counting as every symbol and having 3 Infinity symbols per card, you could just play a bunch of Infinity cards, play that, and just turn it into a throw on its own and just murder people.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's... Retro's a very scary place.
I don't think we're selling Richard on the idea of retro here, but honestly, it's a lot more fun than it sounds, Richard. Once you get into it, it's...
I mean, I'm sure it is. I guess, lack the motivation and time to really get as invested in it as I'd want to be.
One of the best things is
just have me design something for you.
Well, one of the best things
that's what my players did.
You don't even need to buy retro cards to do it. The deck I lost to when I was 2 and then I came across an Asui 3 Crowan Frog City Rampage Dark Shadow Ruin deck.
Oh.
So he played City Rampage,
crap.
he played Crowan Frog, he played Dark. He basically said nothing counts towards progressive.
That's disgusting.
It was
Just
beautiful.
briefly on the subject of limited, because we sort of mentioned it, and to people in chat, honestly, I think the whole limited thing is almost like a discussion of itself as to what they're trying to do, what they can do, and ways they can actually solve the limited problems and the various problems with limited. But I think that's a discussion in and of itself rather than just a 5-minute thing, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what they're doing at regionals with the reduced cost draft is an excellent side event, but it's not economically viable for stores to do as a regular event. No store can justify a £10 draft every couple of weeks. They'll just be burning money. They'd have to make it. They'd have to get hold of packs ridiculously cheap. And cost is a massive factor to limited play because of how it works. Our packs are smaller than Magic, so we have to run 6 packs unless we make our deck sizes a lot smaller for limited. I think modded draft was a change needed just to deal with the fact Attack on Titan and the characters not having costs and stuff kind of messed up draft, because at the summit we talked, before we heard anything, we talked about 1 symbol cards or reduced symbol cards, and my immediate response was, it's going to make drafting suck. And then they came up with a new draft format for it, because how hard is it to draft AOT if you don't mod it?
Well,
I'm not much one for
limited is a
draft anyway.
Longer conversation. So we've been going for 2 hours. I think that's probably a good time to call it the evening.
We could probably keep going for absolutely ages. We didn't even answer the question I had like an hour and a half ago. But Richard has given me a great thing to talk about next week if we can get some people on. Or possibly we do a challenger tier list and we push it a bit further back. But I want to do a talk show. I want to do a podcast recording about if we're entering like a second great age of card games, because the older ones among us here might remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, every IP had a card game. Beyblade had a card game. Buffy the Vampire Slayer had a card game. Everything had a card game. Naruto, and then they've all kind of just died out. And now we're kind of in a second great age where everything's getting a card game. It's just companies have learned not to just copy Magic and do their own thing. And the market's very saturated with card games. And I think that's a great thing to talk about, especially if we can get Main Deck Dan on, who's currently just doing his tier list, to talk about. As well as we should probably do a challenger tier list with the Star Trek stuff. So that's probably going to be the concept for the next few weeks. But
could I just say one thing that I just remembered that you asked way at the beginning of the podcast? You asked how we addressed building fatigue and like idea fatigue for play. I actually had a great idea which inspired a bunch of very admittedly toxic gameplay. How I address it is I look for new ways to play the game. Like my current like hermit style is decks running only 1 attack. I thought, can I make a deck with only 4 copies of 1 attack viable? Turns out I can do it a lot. I've got, I think, 6 different builds, 8 if you include decks that include 2 different attacks. And they work.
Do you have...
I'm just constantly formulating stuff
Do
like
you
that.
have a Nezu that's only running Dimension Sphere?
No, I have a Nezu. Excuse me. It's either a Nezu or a Krista. I haven't settled on who yet, but they're both running Colossus Titan attacks and Levi's Rampage.
No, it runs more than one attack, but I have faced against Corrin's Nezu deck that I think only runs 2 attacks. That is Dimension Sphere for defense, and then the Present Mic one that makes you mill until one of you hits an attack. So because he's only got 8 attacks in there, his idea is to just completely mill you out and sit there with Genkais and Cape. And every time you draw, he gets to draw, so he gets to sit there and be ultimately defensive. Turn it up. There we go. He's in the chat. Turn it up. And so, that was a very interesting deck to come across. I have had a lot of fun with Joker and building like the Joker mill deck.
Oh, yeah.
But it's one of those things that casually, I can come up with great ideas for just fun things to mess about with, like the Levi loop deck. But competitively, nothing's kind of hitting me.
Oh, I can send you some very funky ideas. Like I said, I've got a 4-attack Mimic that is a menace. I've got 2 different 4-attack decks that are my decks I'm taking to Nationals. I just haven't figured out which pilot I want to take yet, between Martial Law or Ingenium.
I'm waiting for Sun Jin Woo. Nothing gets decided for Nats until I see Sun Jin Woo's kit.
Until Sun Jin Woo.
Yeah, I need to.
You've got to do Ingenium. Basically, if you can take Ingenium to Nats, do well with him. Tim Keefe will be a fan for life.
Well, like I said, he's one of the 2, and they're running the same attack. That's the problem. They're both characters. I'm just trying to see which one can survive against certain matchups longer to run this one attack into people's faces. So that's how I kind of combat it. I try to look for different ways of playing the game as opposed to what characters or attack combos look more fun. It's just like, here's this 1 card. Can I make this 1 card work? Or what do I have to do to make this 1 card work? And stuff like that.
With Soup and Potato, Connor and myself did make decks, and I had a lot of fun making it, that are all relating to food. So all the cards in the deck have to relate to food some way, and we included floating around my babies because canonically...
Because Sasha eats babies.
Canonically, Sasha eats babies.
Which is not something that's on the wiki, by the way, because I looked that up. So I was like, oh, I guess they just didn't want to report that one.
It might also be that it gets misinterpreted in a weird way when Sasha eats babies.
Maybe.
But, Richard, do you have any games you want to talk about this week?
Yeah, I can do. Let me send you...
But while you're quickly doing that, then, I'm going to talk about Star Trek Realms. This has literally arrived yesterday, and I'm obsessed with it. I've gone for the rules. It is just a reskin of Star Realms, but the expansion potential for this is insane. And I want to see the Packlets coming with this. You get combat, you get scrap, you get trade. You're starting off with just the main 4 factions at the minute. I'm going to do continents, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But when I saw that you could scrap ships for effects, my head immediately went to, I want to see the Packlets in this, taking ships from the scrapyard and using them to bolster up their own defenses, their own abilities. I think that'd be really cool. Very thematic for the Packlets. And I'm going to do some content. I'm going to hopefully find some people to play with around here or get some webcam games in. But I am really hyped on Star Trek Realms, and Richard has sent me to it, so I'm going to quickly just get that up on screen. It lets me.
So yeah, my game of the week that I played at Club on Monday was Dune Imperium Uprising. So this was a game that was released a while ago, just as base Dune Imperium, and they released the Uprising version as like a pseudo expansion, pseudo relaunch, like a different version. So I played the original Dune Uprising, the Dune Imperium. I love Dune as like an IP. I love the books and all the weirdness and like the David Lynch film and everything and the new films. I just love everything in the Dune universe, and I love board games. I really wanted to love Dune Imperium, and I didn't. I wasn't really a big fan of the first time I played this game. I enjoyed it more the second time, although some people actually sort of that hadn't played the new version and played it on Monday still preferred the older version. It's sort of like a pseudo worker placement mixed with sort of deck building, mixed with just sort of a combat-y type stuff. Like it's sort of fun from a sort of a Dune perspective. Like I said, I enjoyed it more this time around, but it's still not a game I would rush to. Just because like deck building in board games is something I'm not necessarily a fan of, just because like I play CCGs for that really, and it's never a mechanic I'm overly fond of in board games. But not the worst game, but just not something I'd rush back towards to play. I think like if someone was like, I really want to play Dune Uprising this week, I'd be like, sure, I'll play, but I don't think it'd ever be something I would suggest. So yeah, that'll do it for us for this week then, I guess.
Well, we have got the guests. Have you been playing any board games this week?
No, I don't play too many board games. Although a friend of mine who comes over every week, we play like the DC deck building game and stuff like that. He bought a new TCG off of Kickstarter that's called Battle Grid. It's like a tactics chess style card game, with each deck having its own different faction. And it took an hour and a half to just try to fumble our way through one game of him teaching me, because he's a bad teacher, and whoever wrote the rules for this game obviously didn't take people like me into consideration, because when I try to figure something out, I try to figure out everything. I want to see exactly how the little move so I can figure out how I'm going to make things very, very bad for somebody. And we reached a thing where it's like, okay, if the cards are right next to each other, they battle. Well, then his turn started, and there were two things right next to each other. I was like, so when do we battle? He goes, that's a good question. The rules don't tell us when. Like, well, and he's just flipping through all the printouts and stuff. I'm just like, okay.
I'm just getting
like, it's a great concept.
I'm getting an image from No Game No Life when they're playing chess, and it's like, I've started a rebellion in the opposition's chess, and a third faction has appeared. That is a rebellion against their chess. Like, that's what I feel like when you see it.
It's kind of weird, because you can't move your cards unless you have like an ability that moves them, but you have to play them connected to each other in this grid, and then it's incredibly complicated, and it's literally chess meets
I'm sure
like some sort of weird off-brand TCG. I need to have a chat with whoever wrote the rules, because I have questions.
It sounds like a clunky version of a game I used to own and played, and is actually pretty good. And the name of which is fucking escaping me, and it's really, really annoying me that I can't think of what it's called. I'm literally scrolling through the top lists on Board Game Geek to try and find it, because it's gonna drive me insane.
Yeah, I think this one just started off on like Kickstarter. They just sent like the first wave out now.
Yeah,
it's called Battle Grid TCG.
Yeah,
it is fun. Like I had fun figuring out all the stuff, but man, they need some more solid rules. They have more holes in their rules than we do.
Yeah, like I say, it just sounds like a game I have played before.
But we'll take this off stream while Richard go frantically search for this game. Thanks everyone for being here, listening and watching as we talk for over 2 hours about just the most random stuff that comes into our head or in relation to the game, the rules, and the way that the game's been handled. If you do agree with
how's your mental load?
Yeah, and push your mental load. If you have any opinions about the things we said, let us know. Please do comment down below. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and I will leave you with one final last word. Check out Gilmore's Glorious Goods for all your adventuring needs. If you're heading out into the wilds of Faerun or Vasselheim, check out Gilmore's Glorious Goods. He'll get you a great deal if you drop Vaxalian's name. Catch you in a bit.
See you all later. Thank you.